Hyundai, much like Toyota, has offered sports cars on and off over the past few decades, but the automaker's early entry into the segment was rather tame. For example, we had things like the Coupe, and I think that's how you say the name. Then we had things like the Tiburon. You know, at first a lot of people made fun of this car, saying it looked like a knockoff version of the Integra, but despite all of that, it made it into a second generation. Although this car looked the part, it just did not deliver that serious sports car performance. And to be quite frank, it was never intended to. Yeah, referring to this as a sports car is a stretch, but you know what I mean. Some people refer to it as a sport compact or an import tuner. Whichever works, I guess. Now, to be fair, these cars were designed to appeal to enthusiasts. However, they prioritized appearance and accessibility over driver engagement and power. So yeah, pretty much these cars were all about the looks. All of that changed with the unveiling of the Genesis Coupe in 2008, and without a doubt it surprised everyone. Here was a model equipped with rear-wheel drive, engines with huge tuning potential, and a relatively light curb weight for the segment. And without a doubt, this car did look promising. It offered more power and refinement compared to its rivals, but sales never really took off, and Hyundai decided to get rid of it after just one generation. Nowadays though, the used car market has turned the Genesis Coupe into a compelling rear-wheel drive sports car bargain. So with this sporty little coupe, you get performance potential and affordability, as long as you don't mind selling for a decade-old car. So without further ado, let's go ahead, dive in, and discuss the Hyundai Genesis Coupe. Hyundai always had that reputation of, being a cheap car brand. Of course, by the 2000s, they were getting tired of having that cheap car image and wanted to move further upmarket. The plan was to continue offering economical cars with value, while at the same time selling premium vehicles. These premium vehicles will have larger dimensions, powerful engines, rear-wheel drive, and be sold under the Hyundai brand. Hyundai had already tested the waters with a full-size sedan called the Equus. And yes, the Equus did come way before the Genesis sedan. Let me explain a little bit exactly what I mean. By 1999, Hyundai Motors and Mitsubishi Motors presented a new full-size sedan. Hyundai said that it was making a full-size sedan to compete with the S-Class Mercedes as well as the BMW 7 Series in the Korean market. But in reality, this new Hyundai flagship was actually competing against its domestic rival, and that's the car you see pictured here on the screen. So long story short, everything went as planned and Hyundai had great success with the Equus in the Korean market. However, very few of these were exported to other countries. Here in the US, we did get an up-close and personal look at it at the 2001 New York International Auto Show, and this was pretty much Hyundai's way of seeing just how much US customers would like this car. But even after being well received, the car was not sold in the United States. So by the time we got the Equus in the United States, it was actually the second generation model. Alright, so we talked about the Equus for a bit, now let's get back to the Genesis sedan, and then of course the Genesis Coupe. Hyundai launched this sedan in the North American market for the 2009 model year. This car had larger dimensions than the typical sedan they had on sale. So the Sonata and of course the Elantra and whatever else they were selling. Many thought that this car was a full-size sedan, although it was classified by the EPA as a mid-sizer. And yes, people were kinda skeptical with Hyundai's latest effort. A lot of people laughed at this car when it first came out, not because of the styling or the design or the way it looked, but because after all, well, this was a Hyundai posing as a luxury car. The idea of Hyundai selling a serious luxury car was still a bizarre idea. Yeah, I mean, they sold the XG350, but that car was never taken seriously anyway, especially as a true luxury contender. Over in Korea, the Grandeur was a serious luxury car. However, that reputation did not follow it to the North American market. But everyone that laughed at the Genesis, well, the joke was on them. The car became popular, it won award after award, and its success paved the way for Hyundai to launch Genesis as a standalone premium brand. Hyundai would follow up the sedan with the Genesis Coupe for the 2010 model year. Everyone got their first look at this car at the 2008 New York International Auto Show. A facelifted model with bolder styling was introduced for the 2013 model year. The cabin quality took a major step forward and the powertrains were given a big boost in horsepower. The The Genesis Coupe was finally discontinued after the 2016 model year, so pretty much this was around the time Hyundai was starting to turn their attention to the luxury brand, Genesis. The new Genesis brand will offer luxury sedans and go toe-to-toe against the other premium brands. So the Genesis Coupe rode on a shorter version of the platform that underpinned the Genesis sedan. This was known as the M1 platform, and not to be confused with the BMW M1 that was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro. It's a relatively lightweight platform, allowing the lightest version of the Genesis Coupe to tip the scales at just under 3,200 pounds. In addition to being light, it's also rigid. According to Hyundai, the Genesis Coupe had a body 24% stiffer than the E46 BMW M3, which just so happened to be one of the cars that Hyundai benchmarked for the Genesis Coupe. During this production run, you could get either a turbocharged 2-liter inline-4 or a 3.8-liter V6. The 2-liter was Hyundai's first turbocharged engine for North America. Nope, not as powerful as the V6 and doesn't sound as good as the V6, but it did help save around 200 pounds. But either way, most enthusiasts go for the turbocharged 4-banger. Buyers could also choose between automatic and manual transmissions. At first, the 2-liter engine came with a 5-speed automatic and the 3.8 came with a 6-speed automatic. But both engines switched to a new 8-speed automatic with the 2013 facelift. The Hyundai Genesis Coupe has emerged as one of the best performance bargains on the used car market, offering rear-wheel drive dynamics, a strong engine, and prices that remain surprisingly attainable, for now anyway. Decent examples with less than 100,000 miles can still be found on places like Cars.com or Car Gurus for a little over 10 grand. And low mileage cars that are closer to 50,000 miles are usually a little closer to $20,000. Sure, the base Genesis Coupe came well equipped and all that, but buyers of these cars usually seek out something known as the R-Spec trim. The R-Spec trim added track-tuned suspension, 19-inch wheels, Brembo brakes, a limited slip differential, and unique badging and interior accents. I mentioned earlier how a lot of buyers do go for the turbocharged 4-cylinder model. That said, based on some research, it seems as though those models are a little harder to come by. Either way though, there is nothing wrong with the 3.8-liter V6, which still offers plenty of performance and may be a little more reliable for those who plan to rack up miles. Although the Genesis Coupe was compelling, it just never really took off. And what I mean by that, these cars sold only a fraction of what the Mustang, Challenger, and even the Camaro did at the time. US sales peaked at just over 14,000 units in 2011 and pretty much they dropped every year after that, with Hyundai selling less than 5,000 in the car's final year on the market. As mentioned earlier, Hyundai turned its attention to building up Genesis as a standalone brand, selling higher volume sedans and SUVs, and thus never got around to launching a successor to the Genesis Coupe. Hyundai did consider a successor at one point though. This was known as the HND concept car, and during that time in 2013, that concept gave everyone an idea of what a next generation sports coupe could look like. Rumors at the time suggested that this new car would become a larger, more luxurious coupe with an available V8 engine to sell under the new Genesis brand, but that never happened. However, Genesis still has not given up on the idea of a large flagship coupe that would be similar to a BMW 8 Series or a Lexus LC, although I bet Genesis would not offer a V8 like those other cars, but rather a twin-turbo V6. So what car is the closest you'll get to a Genesis Coupe nowadays? Well, the S550 Mustang is a good alternative. Offered from the 2015 to 2023 model years, you can get your hands on one of these for around $25,000 and under, but you will have to settle for the turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4 or the 3.7-liter V6, as the GTs are still kinda steep in terms of price. Besides, a Turbo 4 and a V6 are the same engine choices you got in the Genesis Coupe. Another alternative would be the old FRS. Of course, we're talking about the Toyota 86 and the Subaru BRZ. This is a pure driver's coupe built around balance and lightweight agility. Its 2-liter flat-4 engine produces a bit over 200 horsepower, enough to make spirited driving fun without overwhelming the chassis. With a low center of gravity, rear drive dynamics, and sharp steering, it excels on corners, although acceleration isn't exactly what I would call spectacular. And on the inside, space is a little bit tight, and the prices for these are still relatively high, with many high mileage examples still priced over $15,000. Alright guys, so that's it for this one. Let us know if you drove a Genesis Coupe, or if you owned one, or even a sedan. Did you own a Genesis sedan? Of course, I'm talking about the first generation. The Genesis sedan is still around today, and pretty much that car ended up becoming the G80. So we had the first generation back in 2009, then it got a redesign. Okay, it was still called the Hyundai Genesis. Then it had a name change from Hyundai Genesis to G80. And then that car got a redesign. I believe in 2021 it got a redesign, and it carried the name G80. So technically what you're looking at when you look at a G80 is the third generation Hyundai Genesis. Okay, that's what pretty much everyone referred to it as. The G80 is the third generation Hyundai Genesis. And the G80 is a great car, very competent car. It reminds me of the old Lexus GS. That's pretty much like, I don't want to say a spiritual successor, but that's pretty much what the Lexus GS should have been if it was still around today. You guys let me know what you think, and I'll catch you on the next video.